I'm Cheryl Kagan, and as I love to say, it is my honor to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. And this year, in addition to wearing my Rockville and Gaithersburg pins, thank you, I'm wearing my MML Superstar pin because for the last 4 years, each of the last 4 years, I've been named an MML Superstar. And I just want to thank you for being a great partner, helping me do my job in the Senate, and looking out for 157 cities and towns in the state of Maryland. So thank you for all you do, and thank you for being here because this is going to be a terrific panel. Before we start, and I shouldn't have stepped over my applause line, so let's give it up for a superstar, right? Okay. Okay. Kind of had to do that. Thank you. Let me just read you briefly that this session has been approved as an Academy for Excellence in Local Governance elective topic, and I'm sure you all know what the rules are about that. If you want to receive Academy credit, please make sure you can complete the evaluation verification form, and if you are not interested, we would be grateful if you would complete the evaluation section. You'll be handing it back, I think, to Marie in the back when you head out. If you could please make sure that your phones are silenced so that no one is distracted during this. And we've got a terrific panel on this super important and relevant topic. So there's a part of me that still has a little PTSD over this bill. I sponsored Senate Bill 788, and as I just posted on Instagram, I think I spent more time and had more stress on this bill than any other. It was complicated and yet not. It was controversial and yet it shouldn't have been. And so we are kind of at this middle ground right now, deciding what should be the path moving forward, how to build a larger coalition, whether this bill is needed or whether we go forward without it. And we've got terrific experts here who are going to help us navigate this. Bottom line is, this bill, as introduced in 2018, had we talked about it with three components. There was a part of it that got also passed by another bill that I sponsored, which was the personal privacy. That was Social Security numbers, email addresses, phone numbers, and all that. And so with that being in the body camera bill, we were able to get the bill assigned to a friendlier committee. And it was well received there. So that turned out to be a good strategy. We won't have that option next year, which leaves us with two parts. We have to balance transparency in government, which we all value, and privacy, which we all also value. And where should that line be drawn when we deal with police body cameras? We want people to engage in their government. We want people to talk to police officers and not be scared of problems. We want people to connect, and we want our police officers in the community and talking to residents. So it's just a challenge, especially in these difficult times when we are all traumatized by some of the body camera footage that we have seen on the news over and over and over. So how do we do this in a way that protects residents, protects police officers, and offers transparency? So we're going to have three people who are expert who are going to help us navigate that. And they are seated in the order they'll be speaking. So Rich McLaughlin is the Chief of Police of Laurel. He is a 28-year veteran of police and public safety, and even started off as a volunteer rescue in the Volunteer Rescue Service, and has served the community for a very long time, has been with Laurel since 1986. Yay. David Rice, since 2005, has been the Chief of Police for the City of New Carrollton and is on the MML Police Executive Committee. So thank you, Dave, for your service in both of those areas. And last, down the road, And last down the road is Skip Cornbrooks, who is a partner with the law firm Karpinski, Kolareski, and Karp, and has worked in these issues for a long time. So each of these three have brief gaze. So how cool that you're giving them props before they even show how smart they are in these issues. So we're going to start with Rich. They each have a PowerPoint that they're going to run through. We want lots of time for engagement and questions from you. And so if we can start with Rich McLaughlin. Thank you.
The PowerPoint is available electronically if anybody's interested. My card is in the back. Just get my email address from the cards. If you're not familiar with the Laurel Police Department, we are a full-service police department. We are located in Prince George's County, the northern end of Prince George's County. We are bordered by Howard, Montgomery, and Arundel. We have 72 sworn officers, and all of our officers are dual role. In other words, we have 5 canine dogs and a part-time SWAT team that are patrol officers. As a result, they all have cameras. We also have a community policing unit and a traffic unit. They also have cameras. Camera testing and selection, just a snapshot of this PowerPoint. August 2012, 3 officers were assigned. 3 of our field training officers were assigned cameras. The 3 available cameras that we tested were Taser Axon, Panasonic, and Focus. August through December of 2012, we found that Axon was the best fit, cost-wise, officer review-wise, functionality. And in 2013, we were the largest police department in Maryland to have cameras. We still have the same cameras, although we've evolved to a second generation of the cameras. And the cameras we went with were the point of view or the eyewear cameras. Since 2015, a multitude of municipalities, Tacoma Park, Greenbelt, Bowie, and others have rolled out camera systems. The county police, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, and Baltimore County. And larger, on a larger scale, much larger scale, Dallas, Detroit, MPD, or Metro Police Department in D.C., and Chicago. Why did we choose Axion? Taser Axion offered 2 products. They offered a chest mount and a point of view, which was eyewear. We went with the point of view, and the reason for that is if the officer was startled, if something happened, when the officer turned their head, the camera was picking up exactly what their eyes saw. It was all point of view, as opposed to having to shift their bodies around, and it just was functionally a better product. The cameras were initially rolled out to field training officers, again, because we're visible learners, and you could tell a recruit you're doing something wrong all day long until you actually see it and they visualize it. It doesn't really have the true effect. We went with Evidence.com, which is a product of Axion, as a cloud storage. It's third party. It adds transparency. There's no dog in the fight. They're not interested in what our video contains. They're not going to modify our video. And there's an audit trail. They also are CJIS compliant, and there's an IP address restraint. And what that means is if I go out drinking tomorrow night, I can't sit in a bar and bring up on my phone the video of a traffic stop that I made or an incident that I was involved in, because it's not going to recognize it. If it's not affiliated with the city of Laurel, particularly the police department, as far as an IP address, you're not getting access. And we also have developed, or now it's developed, that it's email capable for the state's attorney's office. So what we were doing is burning CDs. For every case, 2 CDs were provided to the state's attorney's office. Now it's emails. And there's an audit trail. I'd like to show you transparency at work. On May 24th, 2013, at about 2:20 a.m., now remember, we rolled these cameras out December of 12. Officers attempted to make a traffic stop, which resulted in a chase, a foot chase, and an individual being tased and arrested. A civil suit was filed. I want you to listen to what I'm telling you. The allegation consisted of she was at a red light, she was sober and responsive, the officers were very aggressive, the officers pulled her through the driver's window, and she was tased several times. Everybody got that? Okay, now I want to show, as they say, film at 11.
Dim the lights a little bit so they can really get a good look at this.
Got it.
On
Now there's a 30-second buffer. That's the voice coming on. Notice the vehicle placement. I don't think we drive on the left side of the road.
Rich, maybe you want to tell us.
Yeah, okay. I guess the internet is buffering us or something. So we'll just move on because I don't think we're going to be able to show it. If you get the opportunity, again, it's part of the PowerPoint if you get the electronic copy. The officer, again, the officer that's making this traffic stop, the one that's actually on the driver's side, had only been on the road for 2 days. The chase goes up the wrong way of Route 1. It's a one-way street. They're going northbound and a southbound side. The individual was involved in an accident where she hits a sign. She bails out of the car through the driver's window. She runs. There is a multiple times where she is warned that if she doesn't stop and comply, that she'll be tased. She is tased, results in an arrest. She's transported to the hospital for evaluation, which is our policy. As a result of the video that was shown and without the buffering, the lawsuit was thrown out immediately. So it is, again, it couldn't have been scripted any better. Again, the intent of us doing the body-wear cameras was for field training, with the result of it being a field training. And I'm telling you, if you get the opportunity to watch this thing in its entirety, it could not have been scripted any better. It was just amazing how well the field training officer did, as well as in providing instruction going against traffic at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was just, it was well done. So the lawsuit got thrown out, which saved us some money. And that's one of many cases that have been thrown out as a result of the video. Research with answers. University of South Florida did a year-long report on Orlando, Florida with the rollout of cameras. 46 officers were equipped with the cameras. 43 were not. March 14 through February 15 for that year. 53% reduction in use of force. What that means is people are more compliant because the cameras are being used, and it also holds the officers more accountable. It's a totally different mindset when you have the camera working on both sides of the camera. And complaints, citizen complaints, showed a reduction of 65%. NPDC did the same kind of study. They did a 7-month, 1,000 officers with cameras, 1,000 without. Use of force complaints and charging decisions were what they were looking to evaluate. Unfortunately, they didn't get enough data with the number of cameras that were out there, so theirs was inconclusive. As administrators and as politicians, you need to understand there's a lot of opportunities with body-wear cameras. The most important thing is you cannot think that cameras are going to fix everything. They are not. They're a tool in the toolbox. They will not replace your hiring standards, nor will they modify your up-to-date training. You need to make sure that the standards don't change and the training is up to date and it's current. Transparency, it adds a transparent view of events. Good, bad, or indifferent. You can't change what's recorded. It is what it is, and there's a lot of good things that are caught. There's some bad things, and there's a lot of things that it's indifferent, but it is what it is. Okay. It's a great tool for prosecution, internal affairs use, and public interpretation of transparent. Implementing a program, cost, money. There's a lot of upfront money and there's ongoing costs. Your administrative section of who's going to oversee it. You need to identify people to run your program. Your policy, who, when, what, and who has access. It all needs to be covered in your policy. Storage, cloud versus personal servers. Retention, how long you're going to hold it. And privacy concerns. That's a big issue. Cameras save you money. Complaints are down, unneeded litigation, transparency of uses of force when shootings occur. Workers' comp claims are down. Upfront and recurring costs, cameras and storage, grant replacement programs. There's a lot of different opportunities and options for funding. There's a lot of things that are out there. There's a lot of companies. There's a lot of organizations that are offering replacement programs and grants. The additional costs that you need to consider. DVDs for burning evidence. Computers, man hours for maintenance, oversight, and evidence purposes. Charlotte-Mecklenburg has 1,385 cameras, 50 part-time and 4 full-time people that work strictly on their taser units and their cameras. I'm almost done. Okay. Oversight, officer usage. Success or failure is based on their usage. If they don't use it, it's going to fail. You need to make sure that you need to document that they're doing, and you need to review and make sure they're complying with policy. You need to have buy-in of everybody. You need to have training and roles and permissions as who can, who cannot view, and what they can view, and what changes they can do. Storage options, I think you can pretty much get through that. Cloud versus personal servers and the cost that's included or involved in that. Policy, you need to make sure that it's fluid. It's going to constantly changing. Case law changes, rules change, policies change. You need to advise how permissions are, when it's involved, when permissions needed, and training must be involved in all the general orders. So you need to make sure you review your general order when you're putting people out with these cameras. And then FOIAs will be discussed, expungements, release of redactions, and investigations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Rich. And now we are going to hear from Dave Rice, the Chief of Police of New Carrollton. Thank you, Dave.
I'm going to stand because I'm more of a stander and talk with my hands kind of guy. Chief McLaughlin hit on a lot of the points why we use the body camera.
Yes.
One of my biggest things with that is to stress everyone's policy. Can you hear me now? Mine is all about policy. A lot of people bring these cameras out, but they do not put a policy in place. Your policy protects you, okay? It will protect you against, it protects your officers, protects your residents, it protects your city or town. So your policy is your structure. The International Chiefs of Police Association has a model policy. That doesn't mean you cut and paste it. That means that you look at their policy and you work their policy to fit your jurisdictions. You'll see by the policies that are on the tables that Chief McLaughlin and I have out here, they're similar, but they're not the same. Okay, so you really need to focus on that. And the biggest thing about policy is when to turn it on, when to turn it off. When to notify citizens they are being recorded. What to record, when to download your data, tampering with evidence, discipline for failing to follow the policy. These things need to be in your general orders or your personnel policies before you roll your first camera out. And I tell you this because it's lessons learned on those of us who started first. Chief McLaughlin and I both, between 2011 and 2012, we rolled these cameras out, and we kind of kept it to ourselves. We were kind of doing our own thing. But then the news got a hold of that, and y'all know where that went. So I'm going to show you quick. This is one of our first cameras. Body-worn camera 1 was the V-View. Nice camera, worked good, didn't hold a charge very long, and did not have night vision. We have to have all these to work because people don't want to hear, oh, I'm sorry, it didn't work. They don't want to hear it. So we went to this one right here, which was the duty cam. Another issue with it, the battery life. And service was terrible. So, I mean, we couldn't get them to fix them when they break because when you get into a tussle, that camera or the officer hits the ground, the body camera hits the ground as well. So we have to get them replaced fast. This one here, the ProVision body cam was actually pretty decent, but it had no IR, which is infrared, or night vision whatsoever. So at night, everything was black. You could hear what's going on. You can see shadows. Nobody wants to see shadows because they don't know whose shadow is who. So we changed up again. This is the one we're using now. We've had a few small issues, but nothing crazy. It's been a great camera. It's got a great download system. It can't be tampered with. Only command and people we allow to download the videos can mess with this camera. But unless a lot of police departments get into these smaller companies, they tend to go out of business. So we just got notified in 2019 that on-call fire cam will be going out of business. So we'll be looking again. So these are lessons learned, what to look for. I know Rich went over some. And you've seen on his, they found one that works well for them. What's next on that whole concept is, where are you currently viewing the market for the next device? I'm actually going to look at the device they're using because he's had it for a while, so it's time to do something different. Now this one here, storage. We're going to go through this fast. As he said, he does Axion, right? My biggest problem with anything that's cloud-based is at some point or another, somebody smarter is going to tap into that. So what we do in New Carrollton is we download every day. We keep 30 days on our server because it costs a lot of money to keep buying servers. So every day my staff comes in, the assigned staff, and they burn the footage from each day onto a Blu-ray disc. People say, why Blu-ray? Once you burn it on a Blu-ray, you cannot tamper with it. You cannot write over it, and you cannot modify it. And then the state's attorney or anybody else who wants a copy of it have to fill out a form, which comes through my office for approval, and then we'll burn it on a regular DVD and send it to them for their court appearances. But the Blu-ray stays with us unless the judge says, I want to see the original copy. And again, Blu-ray, we use it, and because there's no case law that says we can't, we keep it all in-house. So we have total control of anything getting out. So we don't have to depend on anyone else. And again, I'm just scared to death of technology, so that's on me. You got to figure out how much storage you need. The PowerPoints are up here. I don't want to go through it all, but if you see the bottom part, 5.5 gigabytes a day per shift doesn't seem like a lot, but you times that by the amount of time that's going on, you're looking at 4.2 terabytes a year. That could tear up quite a few servers. And for that year, you'll have a bunch of servers, and I have a stack of disks about this big sitting in my property room. So I'm okay with that. And I don't have to pay anybody to store my stuff. I just have my property guy do that. We got to the Blu-rays. Specific jurisdiction evidentiary rules should be reviewed before destruction of any footage, which means, like he said, some people have different times when they'll destroy video footage. So make sure that's part of your policy as well, please. And again, going back to lessons learned, listen, these things work great. Our lessons learned were we've gone through quite a few cameras to no fault of our own, but in 2011, when we first started, it was 2009 doing the research. In 2011 and 2012, this was not a popular topic. There was nothing going on in the world that people were starting demanding body cameras. This was just something myself and Laurel decided, individually, that it would be a great thing to have to hold everyone accountable, not just society, but our officers as well. Because we review them, and when we review them, we use that footage for training. So if we see an officer that's not talking to residents in the proper way that we want them to talk to them, we don't single anybody out. Everybody has to go to training. Everybody goes to the same training. And trust me when I tell you, you do enough sensitivity training, they'll figure out who it is themselves, and they will correct that. Because if you've been to sensitivity training, it's not the most exciting thing to do. So that's how we deal with that. And I'm going to turn it over to you guys now. Sorry I went through it very fast, but we want to make sure you guys have enough time for questions for us. So I will turn it back over to you, ma'am.
We've got one more presentation, and then we will take questions. So Skip Cornbrooks, again, for those of you who came in late, is a partner with Karpinski, Colorisi, and Karp. Skip?
Thank you. Okay, so my job is to talk to you about two things, really. One is
Skip.
One is what is the implication of body-worn camera recordings for the MPIA, And I also, as part of what I do, which is a fair amount of police liability litigation, am going to inject some thoughts that I have in that respect. I can't tell you the number of times that camera recordings have done exactly what Chief McLaughlin attempted to show you with respect to the incident that the video didn't work on. They have more often than not demonstrated that the officers did everything correctly. And those recordings have gotten the officers and the municipalities out of litigation. With respect to the use of the cameras, turn them on early and often. Only turn them off when you're certain that the incident is over. Of course, I'm going to recommend that the officers follow the departmental procedures. If there's any doubt, turn it on and keep it on. The other thing that we see sometimes on the litigation end of it is you have a situation where multiple officers respond to a scene. And for whatever reason, probably because it's a fluid situation, not all the recordings are identified when they're flagged and preserved. Make sure that you redouble your efforts to capture all the recordings. Another aspect of this, and I understand that it is a cost issue, do not substitute vehicle cameras for body-worn cameras if you have that option. Both are preferable. I've had a number of incidents in litigation where the body-worn camera came off and, it's shooting up at the sky or it's rolling around on the ground and it doesn't work. It doesn't provide any useful information. Oftentimes what has saved the day, if the car is positioned correctly, is the in-car camera recording. Retention. I know there are going to be a lot of questions about retention. The chiefs have touched on it already. I know it is cost prohibitive at the moment. The number of servers that it takes to preserve this data is expensive. Civil litigation purposes, we need to try and get to 3.5 years. That should be our goal because of the statute of limitations. I understand that there's a notice provision with respect to the Local Government Tort Claims Act. Remember, that only applies to state law. It doesn't apply to federal law. So for federal claims, we're at the 3-year mark for the statute of limitations. Obviously, for criminal issues, you're going to have to talk to the state's attorney. We all know what the MPIA is for the most part. That's not the purpose of this class or this period of instruction, is to teach you the MPIA. It's in the PowerPoint presentation. I can even give you another more in-depth PowerPoint presentation if you like. With respect to the MPIA and body-worn cameras, basically the analysis for a body-worn camera recording is just like any other police investigatory material. There are other exceptions that will cover or issues that will cover, but at some point it's going to be disclosable. Usually you're not going to have an issue with disclosing it until after the investigation is complete and the prosecution is complete. And then you deal with whether you're going to disclose the whole thing or parts of it. And again, the relevant exception, just like as is with most cases with police investigatory materials, is going to be found in Section 351 of the General Provisions article. Remember, it's a discretionary exemption. So there's two aspects to how that exemption is applied. One is, does it fall into the criteria set forth in 351, and the custodian must believe it's in the public's interest to deny the disclosure. So that's the introductory language in that section of the statute. It's there. It's in the PowerPoint presentation. Obviously, it's also in the code. So common reasons for denial, I've already mentioned them. Ongoing criminal investigations and prosecutions. Another one that often comes into play is occasionally you will have an internal affairs investigation that's following a criminal investigation. That is also falls within the category of an investigation being conducted by a police agency. All right, so I think I had a PowerPoint snafu there, but with respect to the ongoing and closed investigation, you're going to reach a point where the investigation closes and the criminal prosecution ends. So then you have a video that you could have any number of situations where there's kind of the backstory about what's going on in the video. You have to be mindful of that. There are certain things that you're going to see that don't make it into the report. They're not really relevant to the criminal prosecution. You're capturing images of people at some of the worst moments in their lives. And you need to be aware of that when these are being reviewed for the purposes of the Public Information Act request. Okay, now we went forward to a person in interest. All right, person in interest has higher access to the information contained in police investigatory material. And generally, they are going to be allowed to get more information. It is not always true, and there's a number of exceptions that apply, and broadly put, they will be prevented from getting that information if there is an ongoing criminal investigation or prosecution, because they're not allowed to really do an end run around the criminal discovery procedures. Now, one of the things that you find with the MPIA is you're not allowed to consider the basis for the person's request. You're not allowed to make a judgment as well. Do they really need that? Are they really entitled to that, or anything like that? You just have to look at the request on its face and decide whether it's grantable under the law. Obviously, that analysis is turned a little bit askew when you have a request from a person of interest. You have to identify that that is, in fact, a person of interest who is typically the subject of the investigation, and make a determination as to whether they're entitled to the higher access based on the statutory standard. Okay. Now, one of the things that's developing with respect to the body-worn camera recordings is it is a time-consuming process. And we have a 30-day time limit within which we're supposed to be able to get that response out. But what we found in the municipalities that I represent is you're going to almost have two levels of review. One is going to be at the police level, because there's certain things that they have to look at. And then, of course, you're going to have legal review on top of that, because you're looking for some of the issues that I've just discussed with the backstory and whether we need to redact any of this or deny it, and make sure that there isn't information in there that has no bearing on what is getting out. Because if you think about it this way, okay, a statement written by a police officer, he's already filtered out a lot of that information that's not relevant. The camera doesn't have the ability to do that. It captures everything. So you have to walk a fine line, and it is not an exact science as to what should come out in all cases and what should be redacted. There are certain no-brainers, obviously, and I'll give you an example later, but if there's personal identifying information, sure, we're going to redact that. That's not coming out. But then there are other things that you're in somebody's house, it's a domestic situation, there are potentially all kinds of images and communications, juveniles, things like that, that there's no reason for that information to be disseminated, arguably. Another aspect that's time-consuming is searching the database. Oftentimes it takes a long time. You don't have to locate just one officer's recording. You have to locate all the officers' recordings. You have to download it. You have to put it in a format that is producible. I believe for a traffic accident that I had to review for one of my municipalities, there were 3 sets of recordings, and it took me 6 hours to get through those recordings because you have to go from the start to the finish. And then, if you reach the point where you're going to redact portions of the video, first you have to have the ability to do that and the technological know-how, and then you have to go through the process of doing it and create another recording. Well, sure. I'll give you an example. I mean, you saw in the beginning of Chief McLaughlin's recording, because it's a training video, they had redacted out the individual's face. But things like what you just mentioned, of course, would be that type of issue. Okay, redaction versus denial. And this is kind of, the courts are getting very strict with local governments in terms of responding to PIA requests. That basically the courts are saying, I don't know whether it's just they're tired of the litigation and or they also are fully embracing the idea that government should be almost completely transparent. But if there is, you're going to have a hard time in PIA litigation getting away with a denial if you could have redacted a portion of it. So, redact if you can, as opposed to deny. So, the example I have here, and I alluded to it, you've got a closed burglary investigation that resulted in a conviction, and we get PIA requests all the time from inmates who want to examine their file and everything and look and see if they have a way of getting another appeal or whatnot. So you get a PIA request from the inmate requesting the entire recording. Okay, you go through the analysis, apply the 7 factors from 4351. If they don't meet the request, or if they're not met, the request is granted. If any one of them is met, then you have to look at, okay, well, are there other considerations that I need to look at with respect to, do I need to redact something? And the example that oftentimes it's an easy one is, okay, somehow there was a witness that saw somebody running away from the home around the time the burglary occurred. The officer's writing down their information. They get their address, date of birth, other identifying information. Obviously, that's not disclosable. There's no reason to give that information. And that should be redacted. As I alluded to, the courts are not playing games with the PIA requests anymore. It is an unnecessary expense. If there is and there's no reason to go through that. It's a self-inflicted wound. If you can comply, do comply. But posture yourself when you do this, because you're going to have to, there's going to be certain requests where you can't completely fulfill what the requester wants. So you want to make sure that you're documenting everything, okay? You want to make sure that you're communicating in good faith in trying to find a way to meet the requester's request and or reach a compromise. If there's something in the request, I'm sorry, I'm going to let the Chiefs answer that because I don't really do that. And maybe we can hold that question.
Skip, if you're going to wrap up, and then we can take
Yeah.
questions on all of this.
Okay.
If you don't mind. Thank you, sir.
So I'm almost finished. I kind of lost where I was. Oh, clarify anything that is unclear. I've had several situations where we got a request for police investigatory information where we thought they were talking about one incident when it was close to another incident, but we weren't really sure. Make sure you know what the request is for. Ask for additional time to respond if you need it. Don't just put together a hurried response or deny it because you don't have time. Ask for additional time. And again, I understand that there can be a lot of cost issues associated with, exorbitant cost issues associated with this. If there is a way for you to do it with without charging a fee, certainly you're allowed to charge a reasonable fee under the law. I would recommend trying to figure out a way to do it without it, because if it's the best way to avoid making it appear to a court that you're adding an additional obstacle in trying to allow someone access to the information. And if you do all of these things, if you work really hard to try and meet your obligation under the Public Information Act, courts generally, it's not a guarantee, but they seem to overlook technical violations. So if you get the response out in, say, 32 days as opposed to 30, and it contains the information, the court's going to say, well, what did you want the local government to do? I mean, the person responding was out on vacation for 2 weeks. They couldn't, the other person doesn't know how to do it. They got it to you in 32 days. So do the best you can and make sure you document it so you can show that trail of communication to the court if need be.
Okay.
Finally, resources. If you have any questions, consult with your municipal attorney. If you're not familiar with the Attorney General's Public Information Act manual, get it, keep it next to you. And then, of course, if you're a legit member, Legit is now, they have a hotline where they give you 30 minutes free advice, not just on employment matters, which they've had for a while, but also on the Public Information Act. That's all I have.
So thank you all for a terrific introduction to a really complicated and multifaceted series of issues. Stuart, do you want to start us off with your question? So I'm going to ask you to stand up when you ask a question. We're going to ask for no speeches and super brief. And if you want to say your name and your municipality, that'd be great.
Thank you. I'm Stuart Cutler from Chesapeake Beach. On chain of custody issues, early days with in-car cameras, you had VHS tapes and then discs, and we certainly moved into a different era with cloud storage and so forth. And that day, a supervisor joining policy required you to take the tape out of the car, and chain of custody, and store and so forth. Now with the cloud, how are you maintaining chain of custody, assuring that the tape hasn't been altered by law enforcement?
Okay, Stuart from Chesapeake Beach wanted to know about chain of custody when it used to be in VHS tape and now with DVDs and uploading to the cloud. How has that changed and how does that affect your work? Chief?
With the service we're currently using, evidence.com, which is through Axion, there's an audit trail. So anybody that has viewed it, anything that has been changed, and as I said, recently we've developed the opportunity or the availability to electronically transmit that to the state's attorney's office. They have sign-ons. Everything is reflected in an audit trail. So the chain of custody is there. It's automatic. It's auto-populated by the company. So anytime it's viewed, anytime it's edited, anytime it's transferred, there's an audit trail.
Anyone else need to talk to that on the panel? Okay, sir? St. Michael's?
St. Michael's Police Department.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you guys for doing the wrong things for us. Quick question on how do you see yourself now as an administrator? Do you see yourself delivering out the body camera, going what you know now? Second question is, how are your office respond to it? Are they more favorable of it, than not favorable of it? And what does the public expect? Most of the time, the public expects to go all their body camera.
And the question from the chief of St. Michael's Police Department, and I've been told to repeat everything just to make sure you can all hear it. The question was, now that you have body cameras, could you live without them? In other words, are there any regrets to having this new technology? Second is, how do the officers react? And the third is, what has the public reaction been? So,
The short answer is no, I can't see us without cameras. And I honestly think that as we progress and move on, that will be an issued piece of equipment when they come out of the academy. As far as the citizen involvement, we did citizen meetings and town hall meetings where we gave them the opportunity to question us and discuss it. You have to have the buy-in from everybody, and the administration, the mayor, the council, the police chief, all the way down to the FOP. Our policy was screened with NAACP. Anybody and everybody that had any legal bearing on it, whether it was our legal department, everybody and anybody had the opportunity to modify our policy, and they bought into it 100%. So when an officer does not have a camera, they tell me they feel like they're missing a piece of equipment. That's how they've adapted to it, and it typically is. It's a very important part of their equipment that they carry.
next question, on this side?
Can I answer that real quick?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Just the last part of the question about the public's expectation, I'll address what juries expect. Juries expect you to have body cameras.
CSI.
CSI?
CSI, right. Questions? Yes.
I'm Rich Melton, City Attorney for the City of Annapolis. You mentioned that jurors expect body cameras. Now, it is found that in the absence of a body camera, that they almost take it like connotation, the officer did something wrong, or is it not reached that?
Okay, and the question from Rich in Annapolis was about if there is no body camera footage, does that cause people to be suspicious or dubious about the sort of validity of what the officers say, essentially, right? Okay, who wants to grab that? Skip?
I'll answer that. But I've encountered it. I've tried cases where there were no body cameras because the department didn't have it. It wasn't an issue in those cases because there was no expectation. I've tried ones where the department is instituting them. So some officers have them and some officers don't have them. That is it more easy for the jury to understand than a situation which there's nothing we can do about this last situation because it's going to happen, where something went wrong with the body camera, or either the body camera or the storage. And obviously, I think the attorney on the other side is going to exploit that to his or her advantage. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Tom Putty with Skylight Technologies. According to Ed, you guys are investigating live streaming cameras as well, so that you can see the feeds live in other command centers. And then another part of that is the interoperability of sharing that with either neighboring jurisdictions or like fire first responder communities in real time.
Okay, so Skylight Technology here had a question about live streaming and sharing the footage with other entities, not just other municipalities, but any other entity.
First responders, either neighboring jurisdictions or
Okay.
and secure factors.
Do any of you all do that? Any thoughts or experience?
Thinking about that in the future.
We don't do live streaming. Until the camera's actually docked, officers have the capability of reviewing their video on their phones, only their video. Once it's docked, they only can do it in-house. So it's there, it's readily available, but it's not live streaming. The other thing, as far as sharing, evidence.com offers other agencies access if you grant it. Like for the State's Attorney's Office for Prince George's County, they have an email access. They have access to our videos if we allow them access to view those specific videos. So I guess kind of it's being shared, but we're not sharing it openly to everybody and anybody. There's a process to go through. And again, with the live streaming, I don't know that anybody's doing a live streaming.
It'll go back to what Mr. Fogle said earlier. If we live stream to anyone, then we are violating not the person who we're after, but everybody around us. We can't redact live stream. And so right now, it's not even a consideration, not on my end anyway.
Right now, the law is not in a state where I would be comfortable advising someone to do that.
So let me ask, Todd, give me 2 seconds. No. How many of you are from jurisdictions that are currently today using body cameras on some or all of your officers? Okay. And would you say, let me give you a few, there were so many issues raised. Let me ask about privacy, like MPIA requests, cost, or storage. Which one of those three would you say is the biggest challenge? Just think for a second. So how many of you are transparency and MPIA requests that are unduly burdensome? Any of those biggest challenge? Okay. What about cost? Okay. And what about storage issues? Okay. Good. So we ought to talk a little more about storage. Todd, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm County Captain Todd from Prince George County. I'm also a recovery municipal official from the city of Bowie. Obviously, Prince George County is in the process of study. We have some of our officers that are assigned. So my biggest issue is cost. Obviously, you have smaller departments. What that is a major factor for a large county, state, police force department. So I'm just curious, what percentage of your police budget is actually part of either getting the equipment, which is a little bit less expensive, as opposed to maintaining it, and some of the questions that the senator raised. The second point is, you showed us a video where, in essence, it exonerated the police officers based on the story. How are we using it to discipline officers in your perspective?
Well, I can tell
Okay,
you.
sorry. Let me just try to capture that again. Make sure that I catch it all. Question about the cost and what percentage. Now that the devices are kind of less expensive, but there are obviously other affiliated costs. And then the question about exonerating officers and how that's used. And for discipline and obviously the fact that that footage was on YouTube and publicly available to anyone. So how does that all go for transparency? I'm doing that little add-on if that's all right. So if you guys want to speak to that, you want to
I will speak on the discipline. It does work both ways. I can sit here in front of all of you and say that I've lost to officers based on the fact of the video themselves. And to me, they were good people. I never had any problems, but when I reviewed the video, it wasn't the same person I knew. And you know, first time you take them to training, you know, you say, we're going to train this out of you. But when it happens again after training, kind of left with your hands tied behind your back. So it works great for discipline, but it works even better for training. You know, not just training the officers, you can actually train the public, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, you see how the public's reacting to certain ways we do things. We've got to reinvent ourselves and try to train them to work with us. The other one I'm going to leave to this gentleman right here.
It is a significant cost. You know, but does it balance out in the end? And I think that's the important thing, that when you have to look at what you're paying out in lawsuits, what you're paying out in workers' comp, what you're paying out in complaints. So I can't give you exact numbers. I will tell you that we recently signed a 5-year contract, and so it's a set price, so you know every year what you're getting into, and you know what you're going to have to finance or what you're going to have to locate. That's the benefit of having a contract. And with discipline, I also have had officers that have lost their jobs because of the video. I've also recently had one officer that was indicted through the grand jury based on a video, 11 counts. So it's checks and balances. It holds them to a different level, and it is utilized for disciplinary action.
Wow. I'd love to have had that data in your testimony at the bill hearing for this. Yes, sir.
Ed Marcus, I'm the chief of the Frederick Police Department. We have a limited camera program. We use that as a contract this morning. Do you have any comments that were pushed back to the state's attorney's office reviewing the video modification?
So the question from Ed in Frederick was about the amount of time and any pushback or concern from the state's attorney's office in terms of the volume of reviewing footage. And Skip had talked about how time-consuming that is. So, Rich, you want to talk about that?
We have not. In fact, the state's attorney's office has been very complimentary about having the video, and they love it. I mean, when they know they have a case from us and there's video, they're excited. So it's been a win for them. It certainly is. I'm sure you can relate with the state's attorney's office and the transfer. I don't know how you're doing the transfer through evidence.com. We were burning discs, which is very costly. And now that we have the email set up, it's a great tool.
We provided their own password and code so that their evidence trail is also logged in.
Right.
I can tell you this, I was amazed, you know, in April we do the Maryland Municipal League's police executive training, where we try to train all of the executives in all the police departments around the state. I have to tell you, I don't know if I was amazed or just disappointed. And some of the responses I got to some of the, I'm not going to name the areas, but where they're being encouraged by the state's attorney's office not to go after body cameras. Not to do it. And I'm like, I don't get it, because it works so well for us. I mean, like I said, on the bottom of each one of our reports, it says, you know, this incident was captured on body camera. And like I said, the state's attorney sends a request. I mean, we have a different process, but they'll send me a request via email, and we'll burn it. And every Friday, my property officer drops off DVDs to the state's attorney's office. Every Friday without fail. It's on his way home. So I just lucked out on that one, but hey, it works. But when I hear that people don't want to do it, I understand the cost. I get that. That's a reason not to. But just because you think it's not good, I mean, I work with the state's attorneys, I work with regular attorneys, they love it. So I'm confused on that one.
Skip, you good, or you want to add anything?
Just a quick thing. To be clear, the comment I made about the time reviewing it was in the context of the Public Information Act. And that's just a consideration because you're generating additional legal fees, taking an officer off the street to do that. I've never been a prosecutor, but I defend civil liability actions. And it's a comparable thought process, I would imagine. You know, a prosecutor wants to put a criminal in jail. And if they have to watch 6 hours of camera to do it, or recording to do it, okay, if you know you're going to, it's almost a slam dunk. Same thing as I would view it as a defense attorney defending a police officer. If I can show the jury, I'll watch all the video you want me to so that I can prove my case. To me, that's the job, and if you're getting a complaint about it, you need to have a discussion.
Okay. Over here, sir.
Town of Cottage City.
Town of
Cottage City.
Cottage City, thank you.
Would you recommend or do you do random periodic integrity checks in regards to your fluid?
Sorry, so the question was about, does anyone do periodic integrity checks? And are you talking about the devices themselves or the officers using them?
The actual footage. I mean,
The footage.
periodic, random, in any kind of wild situation.
To make sure that it's there.
No one, you know, you're not, clearly you don't have time every day or that, but just kind of like a random ad hoc.
So
that you
random
go back
spot
and
checks
check
of footage to see if there were problems, maybe that there was no case brought, but just making sure everybody's doing a good job.
Or maybe use it as a training opportunity.
Perfect. Great, good question. Thank you. Dave?
I only speak for my New Carrollton, of course, but, you know, in my general orders and in our policies, it says that, you know, at certain times the sergeants must review, and then, of course, the captain and the lieutenants must review every, I'm not sure it's quarter or how it works, I don't have it in front of me. And if they pick up something, you know, from the, then again, it's random, because like that's a lot of footage. If they pick up something, you know, from that footage, it can be disciplinary, and we've had that happen where we didn't get an actual complaint from anyone, but reviewing, just a random review brought something to our attention, which caused us to have to bring an officer in and ultimately let him go, based on random review, based on it doesn't fit the integrity of what we're trying to, you know, accomplish here. So yeah, random all the time.
Good.
We also do the same. The sergeants have access to their subordinates. My command staff is tasked with randomly pulling video and checking video to ensure compliance with our policy. I also have a training unit, which if it's something that they feel is good for scenario-based training, we will actually develop training situations based off of video.
So I have a question for you guys, but first, since storage was such a big issue, are you all doing 30 days? Everyone who's doing 30 days retention, just raise your hand if you know. Maybe you don't even know. Okay, so does anyone do significantly longer than 30 days that you're aware of? Can you just say where you're from and how long you retain?
Chevrolet, we back up 3 years.
3 years in Chevrolet. Anyone over here longer than 30 days? Yes, sir.
Depending on the type of incident, it's up to you. You got Ed.
Edmonston keeps potentially indefinitely. And, yeah. Ed?
We do 60 days non-evidentiary if it is evidence that it's actually moved over and it's held based on that.
Okay, 60 days if it's evidentiary. Anyone else over here? Okay. Does anyone do shorter than 30 days? Yes, sir.
With civil litigation, you might not even know about it for 6 months or a year.
That's exactly what occurred to me. So I wonder if you gentlemen could say how you came up with 30 days, and has it ever proven to be a problem, Skip, for you in a case like, we could have had that, but we just deleted it last week. So Rich, you want to start us off?
Yeah, to be clear, my video is 366. We hold everything for 366 days unless it's for evidentiary purposes. And there's certain things that if it's an evidence case, if the officer feels like it's going to result in a complaint, or if it's an IA incident, it's tagged indefinitely
IA.
until internal affairs. I'm sorry. If it's an investigation or a criminal investigation, it's tagged indefinitely until it's released by the holding officer. So ours is 366 at a minimum.
Is that because by then you would have had the notice of claim from the local government for claims center?
That's exactly. Initially we did it for 181, then we changed it to 366. And again, if the officer feels, the officer can tag it for whatever reason they feel they want to tag it. They feel uncomfortable with the situation. They think it's going to lead to a complaint. Whatever. It doesn't feel right. They're tagging it and it's indefinitely held until they release it.
Dave?
And with my department, I haven't set a total date right now because they're on Blu-ray DVDs. There's no span on it. They don't take up a lot of room. The reason I did it that way is federal charges on police officers, up to 5 years. They can come back and say, we heard this happen back in 1983, and it's almost past the statute of limitations. Well, the statute of limitations for your department's evidentiary department may be 2 years or 3 years, and everything that would exonerate you is now gone. So now all of a sudden you've got a retired police officer doing time for something that he did right or she did right 5 years, 6 years ago. that no one can prove otherwise, but a jury will find them guilty. So because my paths have crossed with some of them, I've decided to keep mine for a minimum of 5 years, so we can get past the statute of limitations for federal charges as well when it comes to use of force and things like that. So.
Great, thank you. Skip.
The specific question, have I ever had a case where the storage policy came into play? The answer was yes, I did. We addressed it, but it's another issue that you have to address. Where you're back on your heels. And the case should be about whatever occurred in the incident. Instead, you're having to put on evidence of the storage policy, explain why, with the server, and it just costs too much and everything. And then you open up the door for the other side to argue. That's a convenient argument for the police department to be making. The other thing about the storage, again, as I said, for civil liability actions and federal claims, in which attorney's fees are available and there's uncapped liability, you're dealing with a 3-year statute of limitations. So that's why I would advise trying to get up past that 3.5 years if possible.
Yes, sir.
Do you have a code enforcement officer?
Identify yourself, please.
Kevin Best, Town Attorney, 5 Towns in Prince George's County.
Thank you, Kevin.
Do you also place the cameras on your code enforcement staff? And do you ever see a day where everyone in society would be wearing a body cam?
So Kevin from 5 Towns, Prince George's County, wanted to know about who else might be wearing body cameras, and that is something we were negotiating in my bill, in Senate Bill 788, because there's police today, but certainly animal control. I'm going to take away your puppy. Who knows what sort of violence can happen there, or I'm going to inspect your house for code violations. So the question is, are we on a slippery slope, and how do you all think about it? And maybe some of you all will have thoughts on this as well, but Dave, you want to start us off?
We do not currently have code enforcement with body cameras or my animal control, but it is a topic that we are discussing amongst the police department because we're the ones that have to back them up when they call for help, of course. And we have talked about it. We have not brought it before the mayor and council yet because it's still in the discussion phases amongst us. We think it'll be a great idea because code is putting himself in the same danger, well, not the same danger, but they can put themselves in harm's way really quick. And they have no line of defense. So that body camera would be a great line of defense to help protect them from, complaints. So that is something we're talking about. Hopefully by budget year next year, we'll sit down with the council and ask for their blessing on it. But right now, it's just discussion.
We do not, but to answer your question, we already live in a world where everybody has a body camera. I mean, they're out here, and everybody's got one. So it's, I think it's going to be the way of the future as things progress. Obviously not at the cost that we're now experiencing, but costs are starting to come down, and I think it's a reasonable expectation.
Before we go to Stuart again, other questions? Yes, Mike Sesma, City of Gaithersburg. Pardon my district.
Already ID'd here.
Sorry.
So one of the costs that you sort of covered is the personnel costs, which is actually perhaps more expensive than some of the other costs, given the technology prices going down. You mentioned you had 50 part-time employees and 4. Did I hear that wrong?
That was Charlotte.
So Charlotte has 50 part-time and 4 full-time for a force of over 1,000.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the question, sorry, go ahead,
So the
Mike.
question is, what's the total number of FTEs that are committed if you add up part-time and full-time for your departments that review and prepare and maintain the file?
So Mike, so my friend Mike Sesma, City Council member from Gaithersburg, in District 17, wanted to ask about FTEs and personnel costs. And if I can just expand that a little bit. So it's not just body camera usage and all that, but also with the public information review. Have you had to hire additional people or reallocate people's jobs or something to review some of the Maryland Public Information Act requests?
Well, again, in New Carrollton, we get requests for videos and stuff like that. we have the staffing in play now that do multitude of other jobs during the day. And when we get those requests, they will revert back to completing that task, which will be the one in demand, which will be your body camera footage for the courts or for Freedom of Information Act request. And we got a part-time property officer, that makes sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. And like I said, he's also your delivery man, so we keep that chain of custody, intact. So we don't have to add any personnel. The Freedom of Information Act request, we don't have to add anybody, but it sure takes away from the task at hand that we would normally be doing during the day. So you have the captain, myself, a lieutenant, and then one of the admin secretaries. All of us would be working on that Freedom of Information Act, where we probably got 500 other things to do that we could probably get done. But manpower is limited, and we have to make do with what we have, at least in my end.
I would essentially agree. But it becomes taking you away from the other day-to-day activities is the difficulty. But it's a request that has to be met. You make it work. I do see the potential for a time when we have more cameras, people are more familiar with the idea that they can get this, that those requests will increase.
Agreed. Anything you want to add, Rich? We're good?
Yeah, no,
We have
we're
time
good.
for one or two more quick questions. Yes, sir. Oh, wait, you already had it. Okay, yeah.
It wasn't answered.
Yeah,
I'm Bob Taylor, Commissioner for Perryville, and I wanted to know when you're redacting PI from a FOIA request, do you blur or bleep out the sensitive information, or do you just cut the video?
And sorry, and I missed where you're from.
Perryville.
Perryville, thank you. There used to be a Dairy Queen there that I used to stop at all the time. Love me, my Perryville, yeah. Talking about whether you bleep or obscure, how you deal with redactions.
I think if you cut it, you are taking away the transparency. So the blurring is the tool to go with. It's a redaction tool, and it blurs whatever you identify to be blurred. There's no cut, and it clearly has been blurred, so there's no, like the video that we tried to show, there's no buffering, there's no changes in the video. It's consistent.
Okay, are we good?
And I would agree with Chief McLaughlin. When we go to court and testify against, say, a traffic stop for basic knowledge, and the judge will always ask, how the driver responds to the officer. We don't usually throw daisies at the judge. We will tell him exactly what you said to us. And all 4 letters of them, too. Even though we're very uncomfortable doing it, we always ask the judge to forgive, our language. But if you want transparency, like we do in court, we want it on those videos. I want you to know exactly how you acted that particular day in all your colorful language. So, yep, we keep it the same. Just blur faces up.
Who has a question to wrap us up? Stuart, can we go with you? Let me just see. Does anyone else have a question? Okay. Sorry. Let's take these three questions, and then we'll have them answer at once. Stuart, lead us off super quickly, please.
Real quick, I'm going to you. The state has retention of public records and our archive of public records. Specific time. Why isn't the state mandating across the board in the state retention?
Okay, next.
Just really quick, one of the times that we are research on the state-of-the-art body camera that will protect the officers from losing them during the scuffle.
Okay, great. And over here, yes, sir.
I was going to ask, do you see one day body camera being mandated?
Okay, so I'm going to repeat all 3 questions, and then some of that was directed towards me, but I'm going to let the gentleman here go first. So the first question is whether they could envision body camera footage retention being mandated by law, and what do you think of that? Second, is there equipment that you know about, or can you envision in the future state-of-the-art body cameras that won't fall off or fail to operate during a scuffle? And the last one was about mandated body cameras, and does that seem like a direction that we should go? And I'll speak to the likely to go, but why don't you each speak to those 3 to the degree that you want.
A state mandate on the time we can keep video or the footage would be great, because then we wouldn't have so much change in all the way and how we all keep our video. One standard should be great. As far as what you talked, they do make vests where the body camera actually goes into your vest, and there's a hole for that body camera. But now you're talking, you got to buy those outside vest carriers. Some departments like that outside vest carrier stormtrooper look, where the rest of us, or some of us, like the clean, crisp uniform where there are no holes in your uniform, so we got to clip them to our pockets or to our chest. So it's all about preference. I mean, we're just lucky that the cameras, when they fall, they don't break. We can pick them up and put them back on. The clips are like $3. I can afford $3 for a clip. I just can't afford $700, $800 to replace that camera.
I agree. I think mandated retention periods are the way that we need to go. A lot of us are CALIA certified, and there was talk about the state of Maryland doing an accreditation across the state so that everybody operated within the same. And I think that would be a perfect opportunity, not only to mandate a retention period, a standard retention period, but also the cameras. And I do believe cameras will be mandated at some point because of the success stories that we've had. The other issue, as far as the cameras, the security of the cameras, I think there's a lot of cameras that are out there. I think there's a lot of development going on. The camera that we're currently using is mounted on an eyeglass. We've had very good success with that. We have had very few failures where they've fallen off, but it has happened, and I don't know that there will ever be something that, no matter what the circumstance is, it'll be securely mounted.
Fantastic. So I have taken 9 pages of notes. I suspect you all have learned a lot on this important topic. I will just say, yes, we need to be going in this direction, and it has proven to be already complicated politically, legislatively. The idea that it's been multiple years and every one of you has been begging your legislators for guidance. How long do we keep it? Do we have to use it? What if? And what can we redact? And what can we not? And how long? And is 30 days reasonable? And you're asking the right questions. And the counties are asking the right questions. And my body camera bill was a top priority from MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties. And as I said at the beginning, for those of you who might have missed it, I spent more time on that bill than any other. We built coalitions and kept including people, and it was controversial. So we've got to deal with these issues. I don't think we can stick our head in the sand and make it political. I think that we've got to bring the police officers and the NAACP and civic activists and finance officers and grant makers and kind of everybody at the table to have the conversation. Because if we're going to mandate more storage, that's going to cost. If we're going to mandate body cameras, that's an unfunded mandate. And as an MML superstar, I'd be kind of cautious about some of those steps. And yet it looked like mostly you guys are starting to do them. But I think they're all important, but I think we'd have to tread carefully and make sure that we build consensus as to what's reasonable for larger cities like Gaithersburg and Rockville, that I'm honored to represent, and smaller cities like Perryville or Chesapeake Beach or Five Towns. So we've got to make sure that everyone's at the table in this. So with that, I'd like to wrap us up. It would be irresponsible on my part not to remind you all that this is an election year, and we are in a nonpartisan zone, and I am not speaking from any party or for or against any candidate. But my favorite campaign button is on my jacket, and it says, "Vote, or you have nobody to blame but yourself." Primaries, June 26th. November is the general election. You've got to vote in both. You've got to be active. You all are opinion leaders. Make your views known. Make sure your friends, family, colleagues, and staff are aware and register to vote, and that they take advantage of the American right and responsibility to vote. God didn't do that. People fought hard for the right to vote. So please make sure you do that. Please join me in thanking these 3 terrific panelists. Thanks to MML staff and to all of you. Travel home safely.